I think Chapter 8 hints at how the spin will return in the Jojolands. Given that it showed up in Jojolion, there's a good chance it will come back in Part 9 as well, and thematically, it's been closely related to equivalent exchange, because they're both about moving values around a closed system, and whereas equivalent exchange specifically happens in ways that seem mysterious and random, outside of the character's control, the spin has been their form of agency as a specific type of action with consistent effects. When it was first implied the spin would return in Jojolion, I thought the story would expand on the concept by saying that if Josuke learned to use it, or at least control the rotation of something, he would be able to channel and gain some control over how the equivalent exchanges he then interacts with would happen. Instead, the spin ended up letting Josuke reach past one of those closed systems once he was able to feel out the inverse of his own power. The story went to a very different place from where I thought it would, but it did still develop the spin beyond what it was in Part 7, and if Part 9 does this for its storytelling too, then Jojolion's relationship with the spin might say how details in the Jojolands can narrow down the way it reintroduces the spin, what the spin will let the cast do, and how the spin is clarified further. Part 8 reintroduced the spin by having it be the implied fuel source for Josuke's power-up. He never learned the techniques, but got a sense for how to use it through his own power, sort of like how he spent the part finding himself without being able to know many of the details behind his existence. The spin was always a part of the universe, and like how Josuke's realist identity was always with him, rotation was always a part of his stand. In the Jojolands, the characters are trying to game the universe by identifying rules to equivalent exchange. I don't want to talk about story predictions, but I feel that the spin might become more of a survival or expedition tool than in the last two parts, and we might see what happens when stands that don't naturally spin start to. For Josuke, fights were often won by realizing new ways he could expand upon his base power, and I think it was because he kept exploring the power at different angles from the beginning, like he was approaching each fight with fresh eyes and hoping to understand himself. Once he had a thorough understanding of the fragments and depths of his power, he would have been able to comprehend the inverse that would connect them full circle, and that's what I think the spin provided a platform for in the end when he learned to use Go Beyond. Unlike Part 7, where the only two spin-based stand powers were used by people who already depended on the spin to solve their problems, Part 8 showed that spin-related advancements can develop in stands more freely to reflect how it's a universal source of power. If Part 9 explores further into the core of the spin, or even takes the concept to its furthest point, then the story could explore revolution, or the idea that the smallest level of rotation is the revolving of one object around another. Rotation itself is the idea of one object moving without changing location, because the pieces that comprise it are changing their positions relative to the environment. But the overall object's position stays the same, and the pieces stay the same distances from each other. It's a form of movement for something made of multiple parts, so the smallest type of object that can spin is one that can still be divided into smaller pieces that would be orbiting each other, like how planets orbit a star but wouldn't directly rotate themselves because of it. One of the core ideas in the Jojolands so far is that the lava rock is able to move things around itself, and the characters are trying to learn its mechanics, so if the spin does come back, I get the feeling it would be very related to that. I sort of took it as the author teasing this when I saw the cover for Chapter 8. One of the statements specifically phrases the upcoming adventure in a way that includes revolving. I know that this isn't an official translation, so the real text looks like this, but thanks to Google Translate, we can see that the phrase is most likely around, which makes revolving an accurate description that's likely to be missed if the translator doesn't pick up on the possible double meaning. None of this is guaranteed to be in the story, or at least I wouldn't know, and the only reason I picked up on the revolving theme was because when I first caught up in Jojolion, I had to adjust from reading 2 complete parts per month to 1 black and white chapter, so I started making as detailed predictions as possible to pass the time, and make those chapters feel more exciting, since I could look for details that would hint at the accuracies of my guesses. I didn't look for any inside information, and I also didn't want to spoil the plot for myself, so my approach was to fill in all of the details I didn't have from the actual story with whatever I could think of, and it became so precise that everything substantial about my prediction was going to be wrong. A lot of surface level details did come true, but mostly disconnected properties here and there, as opposed to any thorough facts. Because obviously, when a series is going to uphold continuity, follow ongoing themes, and use a specific visual style, there are going to be some general elements or plausible scenarios you can spot ahead of time. But that being said, the spin was one of the ongoing elements in the series, and orbiting was a converging point between several of them. So based on that, and what has ended up being in the actual Jojolands so far, I do think there's a good chance of the spin returning in this way.